Hi, let's get into the reason that I started this. First and foremost, hi, it's nice to meet you. For those of you that haven't seen my prior videos, I am doing a video series on autism and how it affects my daily life. I myself do not have autism, however, I do have a child that does. So to get into today's video and probably a number of other videos that will come after this, as I would like to make sure that these are able to be put everywhere, this is going to be a very, very long situation. So the reason that I have decided that making these videos to help somebody else out there who has never dealt with anything like this, dealt with the idea that you have to find people to help you, whether or not you think you can handle it on your own, or the fact that sometimes as parents, whether you have a regular child or not, we get lost. Plain and simple. The main reason that I started creating these videos is because I am in the middle of a CPS case from hell. Absolutely. It is a very long, very head-bobbling case, to be honest. It's a huge whirlwind of crazy shit. So bear with me. It's going to take a lot to explain. It's going to get very confusing at times. So please, by any means, on this video, on any of the other videos, wherever you decide that you get confused, by all means, please ask questions, because I would rather explain them to you than to have someone go, I don't quite right. I don't right. This isn't right. This has to be simpler than that. Trust me, I've tried to make this as simple as possible and easy as possible to explain. Shall we get into it? I'm going to start off by first off telling you that yes, while DHS, or the Department of Human Services, does quote unquote it's the same thing as CPS in most of our cases. However, DHS, I have had numerous cases because I do have a son who is an eloper, and because of that nature, a lot of this started with his first case, which was 3 years ago in June. My son had managed to learn how to unlock the front door and get out the front door. We lost him for a bit. It was extraordinarily traumatizing, because when you don't know where your son would go and he just ups and he's like, I'm out, it's very traumatic. You don't know if he's going to get picked up by somebody. You don't know if he's going to get hit, if he's going to find even an inch of water somewhere to drown in. You don't know. Thankfully, we obviously found my child, as you can probably hear him in the back watching TV. The norm. He enjoys his YouTube after school. We had one major instance of him running. We had also had about 4 instances shortly thereafter of him figuring out the added locks that we had put on. My front door currently has a regular knob lock. It has a 2-sided deadbolt, so you have to have a key to either leave or to come in the house. It also has a chain lock, as well as a barrel bolt lock. So, I've got those 4. Plus, I also have an alarm system, which is 5. And I have what's called a slider lock, which is a lock that you literally just slide over and it holds it itself. So I have 6 locks on my front door. On the back door here, I'm not able to have as many because the door frame is not flush. However, we have put a deadbolt, excuse me. It has a deadbolt lock. It has a doorknob lock, and it also has a barrel bolt lock, which we have put it cockeyed in the corner, so that way it comes over the actual door. So if he managed to get through the other 2, tries to open the door, it is too high for him to reach, but it will stop the door from opening itself, so he cannot get out the door. The garage door, which is the door that leads out to my garage, also has 3 locks on it itself. I cannot put a deadbolt on that one because it can pose a fire hazard issue. But I do have a couple of other locks on it. So, excuse me, my eyeball itched. However, Not only that, we were having instances of random call-ins. The random call-ins that we were having were things of him not having proper hygiene, and we had a case where we had a random call-in about him having fecal matter in his mouth. We had another random call-in of him being malnourished. These 3 cases alone, all were deemed not necessary. The fecal matter in his mouth actually came from an instance of him riding to school, and because he has pica, those of you that don't know what it is, means that they will eat items that are not technically edible or should be eaten. He had managed to get into his bullpen, obviously, by the time he got to school. So, moving along from that. Late last year, I had a family member that came down with a very detrimental diagnosis. It was a terminal cancer. So, because said family member was one of my immediates, I was in and out of the state a lot because said human lived about 6 hours away in the next state. But while I was gone on every instance from November up into and through January, that preceded the death of said human, every time I was out of state, the school did know where I was and that I was not at home, but there were reports every time I was out of state against his father, who was supposed to be taking care of him at the time. So because of the numerous reports, and I believe that there was 4, by March of this last year, I ended up in a CPS case that was lighthearted to begin with, but shortly thereafter became absolutely a mess. And I'm still dealing with it right now, but it's a mess. It's a huge mess. It's a mess that should have never have happened. So, CPS came into my home. They looked over everything. Obviously, they did their assessments, so on and so forth. And then they began to ask, what was Dad doing? What's the problem? So on and so forth. It came down to just Dad being unattentive. First and foremost. He was not supervising his child the way a child should be supervised. First and foremost. Is it sad? Absolutely. I had more trust in him than what apparently I should have. I thought being a dad meant that you were going to take the same responsibilities as I do as a mother, and you were going to make sure that your child is safe under any circumstances. That wasn't the case. In May, while we were still in the beginnings of this wonderful DHS case, I was at work. I had been working overnight shortly. I had been working overnights a short ways from home. Sorry, I had a word today. And I received messages, not a phone call, which is something that should have actually happened. I received messages at about 3 o'clock in the morning that my son had fallen and hit himself on a chair. I thought, okay, no big. I started looking at the pictures and went, why was I not called at work? Right here in the middle of his nose was a big spot. What had happened after I had left work, took him to the ER because I knew that he had broke his nose. Just by looking at it, it was already purple, it was puffy, he looked really weird. But he had fractured both sides of his nose here. Those of you that don't know what happens when things like this go on, and there is not a proper explanation for this, is it becomes a mandated report. Because Dad could not sit there and tell the ER doctor exactly how it happened or why it happened, it was mandated reported. So because of the mandated report, now it became a more severe case. Dad could not account for the exact times or the exact instance of why or how my child broke his nose. This upset me very much. the fact that Dad did not get a hold of me as soon as it happened so I could take my son to the ER not only upset me, it caused DHS to then decide they were going to do more than what they initially done.